If we're going to decolonize Africa, we're definitely going to have to start with decolonizing the education and knowledge systems. This comes on the backdrop of me listening to one of South Africa's leaders and leading Pan-Africanists misinforming young South Africans by saying that Bantu South Africans must not be killing foreigners because we are all foreigners who came from North Africa and came to South Africa and displaced the Khoisan people who were the first people in Southern Africa. The problem with what this man was telling South Africans is that he was basing his analysis, basing his advice on a theory called the theory of Bantu migration. It is very important for us to understand that the Bantu migration is a theory. That is why when they speak about Bantu migration, it's called hypothesis, postulation, and words like theory and we believe means that it is not fact, but it is a theory, if not a myth. It is a theory that was brought about by European researchers like Richard Leakey, who were living at a time where eugenicists and those that believed in Darwinism came up with theories of how there was survival for the fittest in humanity and that there was a migration of Europeans from Europe to the dark-skinned worlds where they conquered because they were the fittest. Richard Leakey discovered a few skulls in a place called Olduvai Gorge in Kenya, and after discovering those skulls, he decided that those were the first skulls of the first human beings, and therefore Olduvai Gorge was the cradle of mankind. He went on to postulate that all of humanity came from this cradle and moved into other parts of the world. As much as he believes that Bantu migration is what populated Africa, he ironically does not call Europeans Bantus. It is also interesting that in Europe itself, he believes that the Europeans are divided into the Eurasians, Nordics, Alpines, Mediterraneans. They are not called Bantus, even though he wants us to believe that all humanity came from the cradle of mankind and all of Africa was populated by the Bantu people who came from the cradle of mankind. The concept of the cradle of mankind being in Kenya has been discredited by the discovery of yet another cradle of mankind in Stekfontein, South Africa, by again the white man. The Bantu migration is a nonsense. It is a nonsense because when you look at Africans, they do not look alike. Africans in Nigeria have a stature, a facial bone structure, and even size, bone density that is different to those that are in Southern Africa, East Africa, or those from North Africa. Even in West Africa itself, people in the region look different, have different features, and I'm not even going to go into the genetic markers that are also different. When you look at the cows, the wealth of Africans for generations, the cows in West Africa are different to those in East Africa and are different to those in South Africa. You've got the Ankole that you find in Uganda, the Nguni cow that you find in South Africa, the Ghana Mataru, the Ankolome, Dan. All these are different types of cows that you find in certain regions and not other regions. If all people came from the same place, why did they leave their cows? Why are their cows different? When it comes to writing systems in Africa are vastly different. Proto-Sahara in the Sudan, which was the first writing system, the Meroitic script in Nubia, the Medu-Neda in Egypt, the Jesus script in Ethiopia, CBD, Nigeria, Adinkra, Ghana, Tafla, Tuareg people, Arisorobe, Mali, Abakwa, Congo, and the Sanskrit that you find with what are called rock paintings by the Khoisan. They are all different, illustrating that we do not come from the same source. There is now this notion that the Khoisan were sitting ducks who were defeated by these dark-skinned people called the Bantu. Yet when we look at the word Bantu, the etymology of the word is a word that comes from Nguni languages for Abantu. Abantu was bastardized by the early colonizers who settled in South Africa before anywhere else on the African continent. And they begin to develop their eugenicist, colonialist theories to justify their colonization of Africa on the basis that colonization was the way man had been developing for many years. If you go to the rest of Africa, the word Bantu doesn't exist in most African languages. And even in South Africa itself, the people are never called Bantu. They are called Abantu. So where is it that European theory got to believe that we called ourselves Bantus on the African continent for them to call us Bantus who migrated from the same place? The Khoisan, who they say were sitting ducks, are the first African people after those in West Africa to meet the white man. When the decree of discovery was given by the Pope in 1454, ships began to leave Portugal and Spain to discover new worlds and to conquer new worlds. They took slaves in West Africa. They took more slaves in Namibia. And when they got to the southern tip of Africa, they got off their boats from Bartholomew Diaz's boat in 1485. And they were resisted by the Khoisan. Vasco da Gama was to return again, and he was resisted by the Khoisan. And eventually Dia Almeida, on his way from conquering in India, passed again at the southern part of Africa with an armada. His army got out of the ships and tried to establish a padrão, a pillar of discovery in southern Africa. They were fought by the Khoisan. 60 Portuguese died. The Portuguese were never to try and occupy southern Africa again because of the Khoisan's resolute resistance. But the very same Portuguese were able to settle at Algoa Bay, modern-day Maputo, and Lagoa Bay. And they were able to go inland and capture slaves in the areas where Nguni tribes, Nguni families were living. Those Nguni tribes would then consolidate to form the Zulu nation in 1710 after they got tired of the raids by the Portuguese and the Boers. And they formed a militant group to consolidate and protect themselves. But we are told that it is Ngunis like the Zulus that defeated the Khoisan. How could that be when the Khoisan were able to repel the Portuguese settlement of South Africa and the Zulus were unable to defend themselves from being enslaved by the Portuguese? How could it be that these very same Zulus conquered and took land from the Khoisan, who were so dangerous and dominant to repel Portuguese settlement? We need to question our history. The history given to us by strangers is not our history. It is their story. We have got to write our story. And our politicians must not serve an agenda that seeks to justify colonialism by saying that we colonized our own people before the white man got here, because that is a theory that has never been proved.